maximum length possible. Now, composition-wise, if you see, it includes the paraffins, which are the straight molecules with saturated bonds, are the simplest form of hydrocarbons. General formula is given CnH2n plus 2. These are the primary low straight chain, low carbon to hydrogen ratio molecules in crude oil. Then comes the naphthalene, which are closed ring molecules but with saturated bonds. The general formula is CnH2n. High naphthalene content makes the asphalt content high and tends to lower the crude value. The cyclohexane is one of those naphthenes we find in crude oil. Then comes the aromatics, which are closed ring with some unsaturated bonds. 6 carbon molecules or more. General formula is CnH2n minus 6. This is a high premium crude oil, as aromatic rich crude oil yields high octane gasoline. In the gasoline, the presence of aromatics increases the anti-knock properties, and so it is gasoline containing high amount of aromatics is highly desired. Then comes the asphaltics, which are the molecules with 40 to 60 carbon atoms, solid to semi-solid under surface conditions, which have a very high boiling point. Okay, so moving on. This is primarily more or less the elemental composition in crude oil as well as natural gas. You see that the carbon is higher in content percentage-wise in crude oil than in natural gas. And also the sulfur content is high in crude oil compared to natural gas, which is why these days natural gas is a much preferred fuel than crude oil. If you talk about specifications, first we talk about density, which is an important criteria which separates crude oils from light density crude oil and high density crude oil. The density is measured in degree API units. It's inverse of density, as we know, kgs per cubic meters or whatever, gram per cc. It's the inverse of that. If we have high density, it means low API. So the fresh water will have an API of 10 degrees. Crude oil generally has API much higher than that. The high quality crude oil will have API in the range of 35, 40. The medium grade crude oil will have API from 25 to 36, and heavy crude oil will have something between 10 to 26. That is a range, and fresh water is 10 API, and based on that we have come up with the different grades of API for the crude oils. Now coming to sulfur content, this is another factor that distinguishes crude oil qualities. The sulfur content is very important in crude oil because of the nuisance elements it brings with it. So it deactivates the catalyst in the refinery. It produces SO2, which pollutes the atmosphere, causing acid rains. It corrodes the pipelines and refinery equipment. So additional processing is required to remove it. The more the sulfur content, the more is capital investment and the refinery to remove it. So the crude oils which are heavy on sulfur sell at a less price than the crudes that are having less sulfur content. So on basis of sulfur, we classify crudes into two types: sweet crudes, which are having sulfur content of 0.5% or lower, and sour crudes, which are having sulfur contents of upwards of 1%. There are even some crudes which are having sulfur content of 4%. Another important characteristics of crude oil is a pour point, which indicates the wax component in crude oil. Pour point means the lowest temperature at which the crude oil still pours before it solidifies. So just before it solidifies, the temperature at it solidifies, it ceases to pour, is a pour point. So generally, pour-point depressants are added to lower the pour-point because this will cause clogging of pipelines. So in cold temperatures, it will cause clogging of pipelines. So if you take some samples, and North Sea Ecofest oil has a pour point of 10 degree Fahrenheit, Brent is somewhere around 7 degree Fahrenheit, Dubai oil is -5 degree Fahrenheit. The broadly, crude oil can be classified geographically. We see that, we can see WTI, West Texas Intermediate, there is Brent, Dubai, and Bonilite. It depends upon the location from where the crude oil is coming. This is important because this influences the transportation cost to refinery. Crude oil is of no value unless it reaches the refinery. So geographical location of the crude oil is an important classification parameter. Then we have already seen API gravity, in which you have separated crude oil into light, medium, heavy, extra heavy. Sulfur content again is sweet and sour. So what we see is that average crude oil quality is trending down. In the initial days, the crude oil was of high quality. I'm talking of the days when Brent and WTI were the main benchmarks. And even they are even now, but still there are other crudes from other parts of the world which are heavier and having high sulfur content, which are coming in. So what's happening is that the API gravity has been decreasing, but then this decrease is happening slowly, whereas the sulfur content has been increasing more rapidly. That is the trend that we're seeing in the crude oil markets these days. Here we can see some of the few benchmark crude oils. We have West Texas Intermediate, and then the West Texas Sour, Arabian Light, Bonilite, Dubai Brent, and Kuwait. And their API figures, sulfur content, pour point are given here. You can see that West Texas Intermediate and Brent are very high quality crude oil because they are high on the API density and low on the sulfur content compared to other crude oils, maybe Dubai or West Texas Sour, Kuwait. Okay, so crude oil quality is an important parameter. It influences the pricing. The light sweet crude oils have higher refining value, and heavier ones have less refining value because light crude oils have higher natural yields. See, when you say natural yield, that when we just heat it in the furnace, it naturally gives off the products, the refined products that are in high demand, like gasoline, like distillates, diesel, kerosene, jet fuel. So they are of high value. So automatically, natural yield in the light and sweet crudes is having this quality. So they command a premium market. Again, the sweet crudes contain less sulfur, so you have to put in less amount of equipment to control sulfur. So it is less capital intensive to process light sweet crude. So it commands a premium. And also, talking about also, light crude oil requires less energy to process. So you are consuming less energy, you are investing less on the capital investment. So on the other side is you are paying a premium price for the crude oil. So refiners have to make a choice. Either they pay a premium price for high quality crude oil, or incur heavy investment in refinery capital and high refining cost to take advantage of the lower prices of lower quality crudes. So this is a choice that the refiners have to make. Either way they have to go. But the trend these days is to go for the heavy investment in making more complex refineries, which can process more sour crudes. Probably because the quality of crude is going down, and what we see currently is that crude oil all over the world is trending to be towards high sulfur and heavier crudes. So light sweet and heavy sour price differentials fluctuate over time and vary from place to place due to play of techno-economic factors. There are many factors that come into play. What is the refinery capacity now? Are there a lot of refineries who can process heavier crudes and sour crudes? And then if there are, then the demand of heavy and sour crudes would increase. So that would influence the techno-economic parameters that control the price of crude. In general, price differentials tend to increase with increasing world oil price level, and generally the range is about range for the price is about 50 to 20% of the average price of light sweet crude oil. The differential means the differential between the heavy and the light is in the range of 50 to 20% of the average price. So yeah, so that's the trend now. Now going back to the origin of crude oil, origin of the history of oil. So it started in around say 1860s when natural seeps were found in different places in Pennsylvania, in Baku. We continue to see the oil seeps. So petroleum seep with oil and gas rising to the surface. This can be found in north region, north Sulfur mountain area, Ojai oil field, California. Then we have this chemo-rich clay, is a black shale which has about 50% organic matter. It's in the North Sea oil field. So initially, when the history of crude oil started in 1860, there was Pennsylvania and Baku and something which is currently Azerbaijan. So there are the places where it started, and that time it was mostly seepages that were coming in, and people were digging up places around the seepages, and they were easily finding oil there. So, and we have come a long way from there. The history of crude oil and the history of petroleum is a long one. We'll discuss sometimes later in the course. But now let us talk a little bit about the origin of petroleum, how it originates. Crude oil is formed almost exclusively from organic matter in marine sediments, and it is through some geological process called diagenesis. Natural gas is formed in both marine sediments and terrestrial plant material, but crude oil is generally in the marine formations. Most oil and gas start life with microscopic plants and animals that live in the ocean. So dead planktons, they go to the seabed and form an organic mush. Then on them, sedimentary deposition happens over time. And in greater depth, there is no oxygen. So this mush gradually, under the effect of high temperature and pressure, gets converted into black shale. This black shale is which is the origin of petroleum. So as more and more sediments accumulate on top layers of black shale, the black shale becomes buried more and more deeply in the earth's crust. And over millions of years of bacterial action, geothermal gradient, geopressure, this organic material in the shale undergoes chemical and physical changes to form kerogen. So kerogen is organic matter. It is said that the organic matter in Earth crust is about 10 to the 16 tons, out of which 1% is organic rich rocks. Kerogen with 1 to 3% organic material is sufficient to make source rock. And the black cell that gives off oil and gas is called the source rock. How this source rock gives rise to the petroleum and natural gas is something worth considering. Actually, we need to have a source rock which contains organic matter or shale from which the petroleum originates. Now, there has to be a migration process. The petroleum, I'll come to the slide here, okay. So you can see the oil and gas originates in the bottom here in the source rock. It's about, some oil is about 7,000 feet. Oil can be found at 7,000 feet below the Earth's crust, and gas is even further, natural gas is even further, it's about 18,000 feet. So from this source rocks, due to the buoyant force, the oil migrates, oil and water migrates, and that gets collected in some place where they are not able to move any further. Here we see that temperature wise, see if you go at about something around anything about 65 and upwards, we see oil forming. Maximum oil formation happens at about 100 degrees, and even higher temperature, 150 degree, is required for the formation of natural gas. Okay, so now we see hydrocarbons are accumulated in different places here. So in between the grains in the source rock, the hydrocarbons accumulate and they get expelled from hydrocarbons from these grains. This expulsion of hydrocarbons from source rock due to geological and overburden pressure, and they being less dense than water, they rise to the top and move upwards. So, and this rising oil and gas eventually gets trapped in pores of rocks called reservoir rocks. Okay, so if you talk about so reservoir rock needs to have two properties. One is it has to be permeable and it has to be porous. So these type of rocks allow oil and gas to freely pass through them and absorb, accumulate oil and gas like these type of rocks absorb oil and gas like sponge. Igneous and metamorphic rocks, which are the other sedimentary rocks, do not have sufficient space between grains. But sedimentary rocks like limestone and sandstone have enough pores to form a commercial reservoir. So as the hydrocarbon migrates up from the source rock, they fill these pores and the reservoir rock is formed. Here I will introduce you to two important parameters, which are porosity and permeability. So porosity is the space between the grains in the reservoir rock. So you can see the pores here. These are the pores, and these are the grains. And it is essential that the nature of the grains in the source rock are heterogeneous. If they are all homogeneous, you see that if there is more homogeneous rock, chances of forming these pores are more. Because if they are heterogeneous, then within the spaces of these, the grains between these, the intergranular spaces will be filled with the smaller grains, so there will be less porosity in that case. But if it is more homogeneous, then there is the chances of more porosity happening. So how do we define porosity? It's like percentage of open spaces that contains hydrocarbon within overall rock volume, which is normally 10 to 15%, maximum 48%. It's total volume minus the grain volume by the total volume. That is the measure of porosity. Now, okay, so we talked about porosity. Then permeability. Permeability is the connectedness of pores between the, how the pores are connected. If the pores are not connected in the reservoir rock, see, if these are not, if there is no connection, so how will the oil and gas flow? So for the oil and gas to flow, permeability has to be also there, not only porosity. So both porosity and permeability are important parameters which helps in the formation of oil and gas. So these are generally measured in darcies or millidarcies, and there are like if you don't have this permeability, oil and gas won't flow, and that's the case that happens with tight sands. There's a different technique that is required to extract the oil from the tight sands, and so the good point is both parameters are essential. Now here we can see that the oil and gas has migrated, and here we see that there's a layer of non-permeable area where oil and gas gets trapped. It cannot move further because these are impermeable rocks. You see gas at the top, followed by oil and water. So they get separated as per the gravity. Okay, so here we are talking of the same thing. Hydrocarbons are expelled from source rock with sufficient organic matter due to overburden pressure. Lighter than water, oil and gas migrate vertically through favorable porosity and permeability of reservoir rocks. Hydrocarbon cannot move upwards when they reach up to an impermeable layer of cap rocks. So they move along the slope of the layer and finally get accumulated in the traps in reservoir rock. So here we are again showing how this from the source rock, oil and gas migrates. They follow migration path, and here they get trapped. So there's this bottom seal here and the top seal here, which is not allowing the oil and gas to go away from this place. This is the ideal location for oil and gas resources to be found. So these are some of the structural traps we see. These are in nature. We can see if there's a fault here. If there's a fault, there's this ideal location for entrapment to happen. Entrapment to happen. Sorry. So as a result of geological forces and tectonic plate movement, these faults occur. And this gives rise to anticlines and salt domes. Wherever there is a anticline or a salt dome that is found, they are mostly looked after by the geologist, because they are the possible areas where oil and gas resources can be found. And they try to see through seismic surveying, 3D analysis, and 3D seismology, and other tools to locate where the oil and gas resources are there. Okay, this picture is more clear about. See, these are the anticline. These are the places where salt and oil and gas can accumulate. And see again in a fault, in a salt dome, this is typical structure. There are bends on the earth surface like anticline or a salt dome. Those are the locations where geologists would look for oil and gas formations. And this is a stratigraphic trap. Again, these are the impermeable layers beyond which oil and gas cannot escape. And so there's a potential for formation of reservoir here. So I think we can talk about this in the last slides. So necessary conditions for hydrocarbon accumulation is a sedimentary basin must be created, result of movement of earth's crust. A large depression into which sediments get transported. Sediments in basin must contain some organic material to form the source rock. Then over the effect of temperature and pressure of billions of years, the organic matter in the source rock gets converted into oil and gas. Then migration of this oil and gas happens from the source rock into reservoir rock, and it gets trapped on a typical formation like an anticline or a salt dome, a fault or a stratigraphic fault where they get accumulated and form the reservoir. So what's the challenge? Challenge is nothing but searching for the deposits and then identifying the location where you drill it, where exactly you need to drill to find get to the resources, oil and gas resources. That's the challenge. These are the major developments which have happened currently is technology has become more advanced. There is increasing. We could talk about surface topography, increased mapping of sedimentary rock formation happens, and this is projected to subsurface geology, as well to identify how the subsurface sedimentary rocks are aligned, and then you predict whether there is a possibility of oil and gas resource happening there or not. In seismology, we send sound waves that's from a source like dynamite or a air cannon, which gets bounced off subsurface geological structures and then subsequently recorded by a detector, which is put on again on the surface. This has led to a detailed mapping of the subsurface rock layers and formations. And there are more sophisticated technology like, as I was saying, there's 3D mapping, there is satellite imaging, there is magnetometers, there are gravity meters. So magnetometers, what do they do is, what happens is when oil and gas flows, the magnetic field of the earth gets disturbed, and these magnetometers record those disturbances, and they can predict where the oil and gas resources are. Similar with gravimeters, the gravity, the effect of the Earth's gravity there are minor fluctuations which happens, and those help in detecting where oil and gas reserves do exist. Okay, so moving on, this is the first chapter actually. Whatever we talked right now is more about a basic introduction to what hydrocarbon is all about, and what crude oil contains, how it is formed, where is the source of crude oil, how migration happens. Now, once hydrocarbon presence has been established, so the next step is how to access that, how to access those hydrocarbon reservoirs, the places where these are trapped. So that deals with the access and leasing and exploration portions. So these are the activities which are the very starting point of the oil and gas value chain. So it includes the technological aspects which we talked about, like seismic analysis, deep water drilling, 3D imaging, surface topography, and those are technical aspects. But exploration is not only about technological aspects; it's also about dealing with the laws and regulations of the host country, taking out the permits, auctioning for accessing the lease. So generally, if you talk about the steps involved in the successful petroleum development, they would start with identifying of oil and gas fields. Then you move into gaining legal access to exploration and developments. Then you start generating data, analyzing the data. Then you negotiate contracts for commercial production and project finance. Once you have, the appraisal is done, when the oil and gas reserves are proved and they are commercially viable, then you negotiate with the host government, the oil and gas companies, the integrated oil companies. They negotiate contracts with the host government, and commercial production, for commercial production starts. But before that, final investment decision has to be taken. That is called FID. So this is the most important step. Once the FID has been taken, it's almost sure that the project will move ahead. Then begins the field development and field production, whereby the actual reserves are taken out. So